Now that we've set kind of the stage for the basic of what's a logical framework and what are the indicators, the basic of indicators, I want to talk to you about 4 particular tools that you could use when you're dealing with a public-private dialogue and you're a facilitator or you're an M&E specialist, monitoring and evaluation specialist within a public-private dialogue platform. What can you use? Well, we've developed over time some kind of a scientific approach to measuring and evaluating the dialogue processes. And we're looking at different things. We can evaluate the dialogue process itself, and we can help evaluate the results. And so yourself, you want to look at how do we evaluate the quality of the initiatives that we have, and then how do you measure the different actions and results of those actions that this initiative will have. So to look at the organizational effectiveness of the initiative, we're using a tool called the Public-Private Dialogue Evaluation Wheel. Then we also look at something a little bit softer, which is definitely a spiced way to do it, something that's more subjective. We're looking at the impact of the initiative on the reform process. How was the reform process taking place before, and how is it a little bit more advanced today? It's a more well-oiled machine because of this process that we've used, this public-private dialogue process. So we have something called the reform, the PPD reform process table that we use as a tool, and we'll go through that. But then you want to measure the performance of the outputs of that public-private dialogue, and of course you want to know if the reforms or the actions that are that come out of it are implemented, and if they result into something. So you use something like a PPD scorecard, a summary scorecard, or over time you can use also a log frame. And that's what we use in terms of the 4 tools, and I want to go through those 4 tools and also talk to you about issues of cost-benefit analysis, how we're doing it. So first I want to talk to you about the evaluation wheel. And there is a link below about where you can find this evaluation wheel, and I'll show you on my machine. So I apologize for switching screen mode here. But if you go on the website, which is publicprivatedialogue.org, and there is a tab on the left, which is the monitoring and evaluation tab, you will see that if you click on it, you get to a page with a number of monitoring and evaluation tools. And you will see the evaluation wheel, the reform process table, even something else that I will not talk about today called the PPD reform tracking tools that we developed some time ago, and also some key papers about impact assessments and measurements. So what I want you to do is click on this evaluation wheel link, and you're going to get to a place where you can download a file. It says click here to download the evaluation tool. And you have a little explication of what it is. When you download it, you're going to get to an Excel spreadsheet that's going to download. And I'm going to put it up for you here on the screen. So it's on my machine, so hopefully you can see the entirety of the screen. And this is an evaluation wheel. And that's an Excel spreadsheet, which is a live spreadsheet where you can do change in it with a number of questions. So let me now go back to my presentation, and I'll come back to that file eventually. So the PPD evaluation wheel. Now, the evaluation wheel measures the organizational effectiveness of the dialogue process. What it means is it helps you get a score and a shape of a wheel for measuring how well the Secretariat is performing its task along 12 dimensions, 12 processes. So let me make one thing clear. We're not saying there is one way for any PPD in the world to perform any of those tasks. What we are measuring is how well the public-private dialogue has taken into account those particular dimensions and has taken a decision in regard to those dimensions. So we have another presentation that we put out, and you'll find that around this webpage, where we talk about lessons learned and good practice in public-private dialogue, and we go through those 12 different steps. But these are 12 processes which were identified by stakeholders and concocted into charter of good practice. So what's the mandate of the partnership? How is it structured? Who is championing it? Who are the facilitators? What kind of outputs does it produce? How does it monitor itself? Does it do something at the national, subnational level, at the sector level? How does it relate to foreign direct investment? How does it work as a post-conflict or as conflict resolution mechanism? And how does it interact with the people who are sponsoring this thing, like development partners? So what we've done is that we've set a series of questions, and you'll find those questions on the Excel spreadsheet. Here I'll just put the beginning. And for all of those questions, for each of those process steps, we have a few questions, and for each of those questions, we have a few measurements. So roughly there are 12 processes, and for each processes we have 2 indicators, and for each indicators we have 2 data points. We have about 48 data points that we're collecting, and that you could collect, and you could do a self-evaluation with this and rate it. And we give information about how you can get this information. So, for instance, do you have a mission statement and capacity of the participant to explain this mission statement? Well, we give a rating. If you have no mission statement, and if people cannot explain these participants, you give between a 0 and a 10. And the percent of respondents who are able to recite the substance of the mission statements, none is a 0, and all is a 10. And it's a desk review. So when you go to the Excel spreadsheet, you have these questions. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see. Here on my computer. I'm going to try to do this. So for the mandate and institutional alignment, we're asking is there existence of a mission statement and capacity of participant to explain it. We can rate this information, and the part in red in the spreadsheet is the only thing you're allowed to change. And so you can here change the score, for instance. I put a 6, I put a 2, I put 10, just put random numbers so you can see that things change. And eventually you get an average score for that particular indicator. And you do this for the entire table. And there are a lot of questions, and for each questions we've also produced some guidelines as to how to handle that particular indicator. So what you do at the end is you get some kind of an average score. So if I go on top of that spreadsheet, I'm gonna get for each of those 12 indicators a particular score from 0 to 10. Now, my public-private dialogue is pretty particular. In my country, we don't do anything on subnational level because there is a reason for that. So this will have a lower weight, and you can actually weight your score. So here you have a score of 5.63 for this particular case, but if I gave 0 to sector specific, here, you know, the score changes, of course. So you can give different kind of weight for depending on your public-private dialogue. So what this does is that it creates automatically on the right side a particular wheel, depending on the score that you have on the left, that's going to come up. And this particular wheel, again, only measures how well you've thought about some key processes. So it's like if you were to go to a company and to say, do you have a description for the task of the employees? Do you have a human resources policy in place? Do you have a way to measure the quality of what the company is doing? So you're only saying, you know, do you have a good sales and marketing strategy? And so this is the same thing that it does. It looks like the different components of what makes a good secretariat of a public-private dialogue and measures that, but it does not measure how good the public-private dialogue was at actually producing something good. So it's only looking at the organizational effectiveness. And that's what you get, a wheel. So if I go back to the PowerPoint, I can show you that what's interesting is you can take multiple public-private dialogue and you can compare them. And you can also take, for the same public-private dialogue, a different kind of perspective. So here is an example for mining in Tanzania with a score of 1 everywhere for simplicity, a score of 556 at the end, and an evaluation wheel. But what's interesting is you can benchmark that. So if you wanted, this is an evaluation that was done, an independent evaluation done in 2009 for 24 countries here with a rating of each of those countries. So that doesn't mean that, wow, Cambodia is better than Chad. It just means that they have done their homework a little bit better in terms of organizing the dialogue mechanism. Whether Cambodia is more successful than Chad is a different story. But at least you know that the work is done in terms of setting up the foundations for it to work or not. And there is a lot of subjectivity into it. But because we have 48 different data points, eventually there is a lot of things that are cross-referenced, a lot of people that have to be asked questions, a lot of things that are done on desk study by looking at actual documentations. And we feel pretty confident that this is a methodology that gives you a good indication of the quality of the organizational arrangements of the dialogue process. Now, with such a methodology, you can look at change over time of the same dialogue platform, like here in Cambodia between 2006 and 2009, where you see a large amount of change on the monitoring and evaluation, for instance, where in 2006 they had very little monitoring and evaluation mechanism that they set internally in this dialogue process. And in 2009, they had done a lot of documentation and they had put a system in place to capture the results, monitor them, and report those results. And that shows up into the system here. And this is another example from Benin, where you have something that has a score of 3.67. So, but you see here different weights for different components. And you will see the very same wheel. And when you look at that wheel, you can say, oh, well, clearly we are not doing anything at the subnational level. We have very little done on as a conflict resolution mechanism. The management, the relationship with the development partner is not very well organized. So you can see where the wheel, where the public-private dialogue needs to perform a little bit better. So we find that it's a very relatively good system. Now, as an exercise, I'd like you to take the public-private dialogue that you're involved with, if you are involved with a public-private dialogue and you're looking at that video, and go to your to the public-private dialogue website, download that file that we'll also put down there below the video, and start to use it and play with it. And that's a good exercise to do. And you know what's great as well is to use those kind of wheels and to compare different kind of stakeholders. If you were to ask the same questions by talking only to the public sector, and then asking the same question talking only to the private sector, and you could actually compare those two wheels and see different type of diagrams on the same wheel. And then what's interesting is that it creates a discussion. It empowers people to think about, why do we have a different perception of this particular indicator? Well, we believe we're doing it like this, we believe we're doing it like that, and that's quite interesting. So if you have the possibility to do it with two different sets of constituents and then compare, it's even more rich than if you're doing it with one. So I'll let you do this exercise and then go to the next step.